So here we are in 2019 answering your questions, and this one is for Gordon Potter, who asked me about the interface on GarageBand for iOS to do with the scales and the scale presets. They're very powerful, very good, and I'm going to explain them all to you now. Timestamps below you can see the various scales, so feel free to jump forward or backwards to a particular scale that you want to have a look at. On the left hand side of your screen you'll see the bigger version of my iPad here, so you can see what's going on. So, the major scale first. This is the scale that we're all brought up with in the Western classical tradition, which is this. Yeah, we all know that. Any singing teacher. Beginning of a singing lesson, it's always major scales, just running up and down those to get your pitching. Now, if I was to play that major scale to you over the major chord, you can hear that you can make a tune out of it. Now, if I do that with the major scale on GarageBand, I've got the electric piano sound, so you can hear it as a different tone, a different timbre to the piano. You've got this. There is a troublesome note there though, and that's the fourth note, the F. So if you've got a C chord, that does grate a little. Now, you can, however, still use it, but maybe you could use it as a passing note between two others, namely the third and the fifth. That's fine. Now, the idea with all of these scales is not to just run up and down them. It kind of doesn't work. So maybe try and randomize things, or you could go up by skipping a note. That's it's an idea. Or you could go up in fifths perhaps. You could do that. Gives it a sort of nice dreamy quality. Okay, so the list of the scales. Now, I like this list because it actually gives you the technical name of the scale. It's not just settings 1 to 16 or something where you just go, oh, that sounds all right, oh, I'll use that. So GarageBand, as well as being very flexible with the scales, is also giving you a really good sort of insight and education into what scales are all about. So, major pentatonic is the next one I'm going to show you. Now, this is the sort of get out of jail free in terms of your major scale, because it doesn't have that fourth note. It doesn't have that fourth note in. The reason the fourth note is a problem is because the major chord that major scale goes over, the major chord is made up of the first, the third and the fifth notes, is that that third note really does define what the chord is. So if you've got something right next to it, a semitone away, it can really sort of play with it can sort of adversely affect the tonality of what you're trying to achieve. Especially if it's an octave and a semitone away, then it's even so. Yeah, I mean, that's exploration. It might have a limited audience though. So the major pentatonic gets rid of that F, and it also gets rid of the B, which is not, the B is not such a problem. actually changes the chord to a major 7. But the major pentatonic here just does this. So it gets rid of the 4th and the 7th, so it's just 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then the 8th note at the top. Get all sorts of things. It lends itself particularly well to a vocal line. It's also the beginning of My Girl. My girl, sunshine on a cloudy day. It's following the C major pentatonic, so it's a very nice scale to use. It does, however, have fewer tones in it. Tones. What's a tone? Well, in music theory parlance, a tone is the distance between two notes, that is, two semitones. That's a tone. But it's really the American word to describe a note. And I like the word tone because it implies a more organic approach to music rather than just notes. A tone, because of the tone also with tone quality. It's quite a nice word to use there. Moving on, we've got the major blues. Now, this is essentially the major pentatonic but with an extra note. And it's this one here, the sharpened second note. It gives it that sort of jazzy edge. Can't actually hear what I'm doing. Just tapping randomly on the iPad, but perhaps that's the point. You can tap something in and then go, oh yeah, I like that, or I'm not so sure about that. Everything can be edited afterwards. When you put your take down on GarageBand, when you're recording your line, if there's a note you don't like, you can actually adjust it to any note. It doesn't have to be the note that's in your scale. When you go to the edit window, you can choose any other note. So it's good. This gives you a starting point of, there's your scale, have a go. If it's not to your liking, you can tweak it afterwards. I like that. That's basically what it's for. Moving on, we've got the Mixolydian mode. Now, this has more notes in it. And what it is it's a major scale, but with a flattened 7th note. Now, it goes over what's called a dominant 7th chord. There's your C7 chord. So it's quite jazzy in its approach, or bluesy really. Now you can combine this if afterwards you want to edit something, you think, well actually I want that major blues and the Mixolydian tone, I want to mix and match. You can't strictly do it on here, you can't have two scales at once. But if you look at what each scale has in it and make a note of the tones that are in it, make a note of the notes, make a note of the tones that are in it, you could actually mix and match them together. So Mixolydian does that. We've got our 4th problem back. There are two ways round this. Either you can use the major blues with your Mixolydian component, or you could take that 4th note and raise it. Now raising means to bring it up a semitone, or sharpening it. But it is pretty modern and not to everyone's taste, and it's pretty sort of jazzy and it's very American sounding. You've got the sharpened 4th in the Simpsons theme tune. It's called the Lydian dominant mode. It's not one of the scales that's on here. It's pretty, it's not as commonly used, but it's a way of getting around that fourth problem. So, blues with the Mixolydian, if I just tap on here. And there it is, there's your sort of scale. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to delete what's there at the moment let's get my electric piano back and my scale, my Mixolydian. There we go, that's where I was. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record something using this particular mode, just so you can see this in action, not just the piano, but on here as well. Now, I've got a pair of headphones here that I can just listen to the iPad on. For some reason, I decided not to wear them when I was tapping that, but actually, as I said, it's more fun that way. So, here we go. Let's just undo that and have the metronome with it as well. Okay, so there's 4 bars of a Mixolydian on C. If I now play the chord with that, what I've got is a C7 chord, like that. Now, if I want to maybe get a guitar here, I need to make sure that I've got the right chord. Now, this is a slight aside, but you can edit the chords. I've got a C chord here. But if I go into my settings on here, there's a thing called Edit Chords, which allows you to change any of the chords that you see there, any of those 8 chords, into something else. It also allows you to add that dominant 7th, which makes it more sort of match that Mixolydian mode. And there's your flattened 7th. So, didn't hear the 7th in there. So, just try. For some reason, I can't hear the 7th in there. Perhaps there's a little bug going on in there. But the point is, you've got, what I could actually do is go back to the guitar and just strum the chord rather than auto play it. I'll do that instead. It's worth a note to Apple. The autoplay function, I'll just double check that it works, maybe on 4. Interesting, there's no 7th there. Okay, well, the 7th is there, so it's fine. And I'm just going to put just an acoustic drummer with that as well. Some quantizing perhaps. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that you can hear that Mixolydian mode works fine. So moving on to the next scale down the list, Klezmer. Now, if you've not heard of Klezmer, binge watch it on YouTube. It's a style of music, really sort of an Eastern European style, mostly a Jewish art form. And it's dance music, it is energy personified. And the Klezmer scale does this. Instead of me belting it out like some moron, I'm going to just play the chord of C7. So Duke Ellington's Caravan actually uses almost the same sort of art form, scale. It's quite dramatic with that semitone at the start of your scale. But then it's still a major chord because it's got this E, a major scale rather, because it's got the E in. So it's, if you look at the list of scales, it is one of your major scales. In fact, it's the bottom one before we turn to the minors. So it works over a major chord. You've got to be sure that you want to use that scale. But if you're making something that's sort of quite upbeat, quite dancey, you could try the Klezmer scale. There's a lot going on there. Now, there's quite a few books on this. Ilana Kravitz wrote a book about Klezmer fiddle playing. I'm a violinist, and there's all sorts of, it just opens a door into another universe. So I'd urge you to take a look at Klezmer as an art form because it's really fantastic. To the classical fraternity, this will ring some bells because the Klezmer scale on C, which we've got here at the moment, is the same as the F minor harmonic, which is very much on the sort of repertoire of any classically trained musician. It just starts in a different place. Now that is how the modes work as well. If we've got C major, the Dorian mode on D is basically the same scale, but because of where it is, where it starts, all of the notes are different distances from each other, and it gives it that different complexion. So moving on, we're now, I'll just go back to the minor pentatonic. Here we go. Now, this is the most basic minor scale that we can have. So if we've got a C minor chord, it only has those 5 notes in it, hence the name penta. So it gets rid of some of those extra notes that maybe you don't want. Don't forget, with scales, it can become overly complicated. And if you run up and down scales, as I said before, it just sounds boring. And then with no gaps and no rests, phrase this one. Very nice, and it's very, very easy to get a good sound from any of those notes. They don't sound, none of them sound terrible. None of them sound sort of slightly grating. So, moving on, the minor blues. It's, again, a pentatonic with an extra note, just like with the major blues and the major pentatonic. The minor blues does this. So it's the minor pentatonic, but with the addition of that sharpened 4th note. Be careful, don't overuse it. it's meant to be a flavour. You know, if you add too much flavour into your curry, you know, it's the same with this. That's probably as much as you'd need to do in that particular phrase before that note becomes an issue. So this is a minor scale. It's the second in the list. So it relies on the fact that your chord has become a minor chord instead of a major one. Japanese. I mean, this is pretty inclusive, really. There's lots and lots going on here. So now, there's no minor third in here, that E flat. So is it a minor scale? Well, it kind of is because of some of the other tones in there. It's kind of, you can use it for either, really. Quite nice for a sort of an ambience type minor sound where you're not just going. Might be quite nice as a sort of a glissando. You record that and open with that scale. So it is worth just listening to each tone of these scales as you go through them, just to get a flavour of the distances between these notes. And if you have a keyboard or guitar, it's worth just tapping them out and having a go on an instrument as well, just to teach yourself those scales, and in particular in any key. So moving on, we've got minor. Now, there are actually quite a few different types of minor. This one is called the natural minor, or if you're thinking in modes, the Aeolian mode. And what it does is it does this. So it's like a diatonic scale. There are 7 notes. All of the notes work fine, with the possible exception of the 6th note. In the major chord, we had the 4th, which was a bit of an iffy. Whereas here, we've now got the 6th. It really needs to fall. So be careful with that 6th note. Now, just skipping one note, one scale on the list here, we've got the Dorian, which actually sorts that problem for you because it turns the A flat, there, that iffy note, into an A natural. So it turns it into a slightly less sad sounding minor scale. But again, we've got, with this scale, actually we have no really problematic notes, so it kind of rescues you a bit. But it can be, you know, playing it safe is not always a nice thing to do. You know, we have to explore. We only have 12 notes here and a limited number of chords, but the possibilities remain endless. So with the Dorian scale, we also have this minor 6th chord, which is quite a big thing in sort of gypsy jazz. it's a nice addition, it's a nice tonal addition to your minor chord to put your sixth in. Now, in addition to the scales on GarageBand, you can also play them as chords. So you can get your chords out of this, out of the scales as well. Nice, really nice. You can just try different chords out. So it means that you can, well, you don't need to rely on that sort of autoplay chord that we had just now with the guitar that didn't do that seventh. So, moving back one place to the one I've missed out, the Harmonic Minor. What's that? Well, I just described that just now when I was talking about the Klezmer scale. It does this. Sounds familiar as a tune. So, Ghost Town by the Specials is in the key of C minor. And the Harmonic Minor, the reason it's called that is because it works over the harmony in C minor. C minor has those three notes in, but the dominant seventh is the main other chord with your minor. Because we have a B natural here, that's where it comes from in the harmonic minor. So it's like a minor scale, but with the addition of that harmonic component, and that's why it's called the harmonic minor. So, moving on to the last one, Southeast Asian. That's fairly generic, really. It's very similar to that Japanese one, which went like this. It's just a very slightly different flavour. Why it's not next to Japanese, I'm not quite sure. But give it a go. If it works, great. So if I just go that with your minor chord. It's absolutely fine. I mean, any of these, you can adjust the notes afterwards, as I showed you just now. So all of these scales are available on all the touch instruments in GarageBand, including the bass. You might want a bass line that just explores a bit. And you can also, in a way, with the autoplay on this, with the chords, if it doesn't work so well, you can always sort of go back into your scale and think, oh, which note can I change to what? So you are getting a massive sort of musical education out of this. And so I hope you've enjoyed that demo, and I hope it made some sense in context of the sort of styles and, of course, the acoustic piano as well. So there we go.